How long did you have to, were you happy with how long you had to wait from when you were referred to go into a hospital? 41% very satisfied. If you could get a number like that for many private sector businesses in this country, you'd be quite pleased. Only 1 person in 20, or just over 7%, not at all satisfied with waiting time. So in a sense, we've cracked it. And stories like the Daily Telegraph seems to be telling us all the time about increased waiting times will be really interesting to see how that plays off. And the reason for that simply is that all of these things are non-linear. Those of you who have been slaving away in the NHS as you cut waiting times from 6 months to 3 months saw no change at all in perception, and that's because perception of change is non-linear. So one of the things for the government is that if things do get worse, waiting times can get rather longer than they are now, and there will not be an immediate sort of riot and people with pitchforks going down to meetings and things. It will hit some tipping point. And the interesting issue is, what is that tipping point? I think we don't know, but it's certainly the case that it doesn't move in a linear fashion. What about choice? People sort of get choice now. 77% saying that you can get a wide range of care and treatment outside hospital. People are having it, 62%. So people are getting choice. I think the challenge is that this government, as with the previous one, seems to think that being able to choose providers is something that will make many people in this country very excited and pleased. Whereas most people don't want to actually have to choose providers, they just want to go and find something good locally. A small minority of people like me love looking at tables and data, finding out that Sawbones X is slightly better than Sawbones Y, and then going to choose them. But most of us don't. We just want a good local service. And so I think that is possibly one challenge. But public are recognising it. They've got choice. Let's look at something else. Strengthen the power of GPs by enabling them to commission care. Interesting to see what people say about that. If you look at GPs themselves, do you like practice-based commissioning? They thought that was pretty good. They're okay about that. What do you think about, is it making things better? Now, it's interesting. They were sort of negative to start with, or saying they was too early to tell. Now, the last time we looked, sort of divided. But the trends, if anything, sort of improving. But a lot of GPs very anxious about what's coming down the track. Has it produced new services? 64% said it had. In this time series, gone from a third, no new services, 25%. So again, giving more control does seem to do some of the things that Andrew Lansley is expecting. And in terms of who's providing things, we've got 41% who say they don't care whether service is provided by the NHS or a private company. 36% disagree. Now, in practice, what happens, if you're told that you need a hip replacement and it can be done in a Bupa hospital or it can be done in an NHS hospital, the figures who say, no, I'll wait and wait and wait till I go into an NHS hospital, diminish dramatically. And one of the things I learned about this, as with so many issues when it comes to reform, is something that Nicholas Ridley taught me. Some of you look like you were old enough to know who Nicholas Ridley was. He was a man who worked with somebody called Michael Howard selling off the water industry, and I was a very young market researcher in the 1980s, and I was helping do this as one of my first projects with government. And we put up on the big screen a slide, a bit like this, saying 90% opposed to water privatisation. And I was sort of vaguely young and idealistic at this point. And Ridley, I'm used to now dealing with ministers, so Ridley goes like this. Next slide, please. They'll forget about it next year. And I thought, oh my God, Ridley, is just a demon or something. But of course, Ridley is very, very clever. The public did forget about water privatisation. Today, only 1% of people concerned about it. And so I think a key thing in terms of who delivers services is if it's effective, if it's fair, people will get over it, quite frankly. They do love the NHS. But it's in some ways more about principles and an idea than it is about the actual institutions themselves, the actual bricks and mortar. So I think that 36% is possibly a little bit high in terms of what would actually happen. But nevertheless, it does show that some people are anxious about it. What are we going to do? I love this, the coalition commitment to the role of PCTs. I thought it was always, look, directly elected individuals on the boards of their local PCTs, 2 months later abolished. But nevertheless, it was worth, the local PCT, it says, in the coalition agreement, will act as a champion for patients. And then, anyway. So what do we think about that? Well, I think, again, the challenge we have here is similar to many aspects of the big society. And that is that, people think, 20% say, yeah, the public should be much more involved in terms of choosing what we prioritise here, where we spend the money. Quite a lot of us, though, like to defer to people in white coats. Final decisions should be made by qualified health professionals, and indeed 20%, particularly amongst older people and more working class people, decisions should be solely made by qualified health professionals and not the general public. So the idea that everybody's bursting to get down to a meeting and start voting on what the GP consortium is going to be doing, deranged, utterly deranged. The other evidence on this is, should we have a local need rather than one size fits all? I think it just shows how you ask the question makes a huge difference in this area. Treatment should only be available if they're available to everyone and not dependent on where you live. 73% will go along with that. So how you express these things makes a huge difference to where people come out. I think I'll skip that one, it's boring. This is, of course, the challenge. If you say to people, this is from somewhere just outside London, do you want to have a sort of community partnership? We'll all get together and decide how to spend the money on local services. Would you like to come along to one of these meetings? Do you think we should do that? 82% say, yeah, we should do that. Get people more involved in delivering public services, making choices. OK, well, we'll do that then. And how about you? Will you be personally interested in coming along to this? You must be joking. So it goes down, 54% say no, 26% say yes, and I think it comes up when we actually look at who does it, 2%. 2%. And they, of course, are the normal people who go to parish council, well, not normal, the abnormal people who go to parish council meetings and everything else. And the idea that we're going to shift this is very challenging, particularly if you look at things like volunteering, and one of the aspects, but only one, of the big societies that we should give up some of our time and spend a bit more time helping each other rather than expecting government to do things, and the public likes that idea. But if you look at how many people do give up their time, it's strongly correlated with wealth. The richer the area, on the left of that chart, the higher the level of formal volunteering, and the poorer the area, a very strong relationship, somewhere like where we're situated today, a much lower level. So as we withdraw services with local government cuts in these communities, how do we pump prime things to get communities to take some action? And I think that's going to be a real challenge. Now, on the white paper, this is what people, after it first came out, said about it. What's it about? They've got the idea that it's about GP commissioning. They quite like that. 21% say they hadn't heard anything. Other people don't know. The other difficulty is that the other changes that are announced, you can see lots of the word cuts, 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 cuts. Now, cuts in bureaucracy, of course, could be good. Cuts in managers could be good. Cuts, just generally, probably aren't good. And when you look at whether people think giving GPs more say will make things better or worse, of course, because we like GPs, that's a good thing. 44% say it will make the NHS better, only 20% worse. But some of the challenges, if we go on, overall will the changes make things better or worse? 38% say they'll make it worse, 29% better. And that trend, the government is not winning the argument on this. So some real work to be done on explaining. And it's interesting to see David Cameron beefing up Downing Street and putting more, and now going to personally spend some time explaining Andrew Lansley's policies. And possibly he would need to do that. The NHS is typically one of the top 4 or 5 issues that people vote on in general elections. And in terms of satisfaction, I can see it's going to be very hard for that to keep going up.